Wow, I cannot even believe it's like the second week of April already. And I'm really glad, really sad, really ecstatic. And time just passes by quickly. On one of my Facebook memories, they like to throw things up there, and sometimes you're really glad they did, and sometimes you're not. But my memory today was from 3 years ago when I posted I had received an acceptance letter into my doctoral program. And that was a big day for me. And so it's been craziness and insanity ever since. So I totally can get when you have too much going on and you have too much homework and so many competing priorities, and yet you still want to enjoy life. So I get that. And I'm glad that you're here tonight. And I hope that through all of the people that have come, you've been able to learn something from them that in some way contributed to your personal or your professional growth, or helped you to more clarify what it is you feel called to do. And I hope that it's more than just find a job. And if you're still in that place, I hope by the time this evening is over, that perhaps that will have diminished even further when you consider what the Lord has in mind for you. And so I would like to open with a word of prayer tonight, and I want to ask that you really think about what has the Lord gifted you with, and how is He calling you to utilize it for the good of humanity, for the good of the kingdom. So let's just bow our heads. Father in heaven, we thank you for the opportunity to have another day of life, breath, and the good gifts that you give to us. You have equipped each one of us uniquely for your purposes and for your plans. And we know they're big, Lord. Help us to be ready to embrace them with all that you created us to be. In Jesus' name, amen. So tonight we're going to talk a little bit about spiritual gifts. And my clicker is on speed rail train, so I apologize. Spiritual gifts. Have you ever taken a spiritual gifts inventory? Anyone? Raise your hand. High as so I can see. Okay, so some of you have. Have you ever heard of spiritual gifts? Raise your hand. Okay, excellent. So spiritual gifts, we talk about them a lot in the church, about how people are equipped, how do biblical gifts show up. Some people, when they think of that word spiritual gifts, they know these people and they have so many gifts, and they think, well, that person is so gifted, but I can't really think of any that I have for myself. But you can be assured because that you do, because the Lord said that He gave everyone at least one gift. So everyone in this room, even if you haven't discovered it yet, you have at least one spiritual gift. Now, if we were to unwrap our gifts and put names to them and what they might look like and what they might manifest like if we saw them, they might look like some of these. They might look like the gift of encouragement, giving, leadership, mercy, prophecy, service, teaching. These are some of the different texts that you'll find them in. Ephesians, you might find being an apostle, a pastor for teaching, evangelism, the gift of prophecy. 1 Peter 4, you might find serving and teaching. 1 Corinthians 12, administration, discernment, healing, interpretation of languages, prophecy, wisdom, a gift of languages, apostle, faith, helps, knowledge, miracles, and teaching. There's even the gift of hospitality, gifts of prayer that you'll see that emerge out of spiritual gifts inventory that you might have the opportunity to do. And the Lord created you uniquely and for this purpose, specifically so that, one, you could grow in your knowledge of Him, and in your knowledge of how you're uniquely connected to those around you, and how you're uniquely created to share your gift with the world. Because really that is one of His purposes, is that for you to find your gift and to then share it with others. It's not like the treasures, it's not like going digging for gold out in California and keeping it all to yourself, right? So I saw a gentleman on a news show the other night. He was metal detecting and he found this huge piece of 4 ounces of gold. And he was so excited and he cleaned it up and he put it in a display case. And it is there along with all of the other artifacts that he has found and stored in his treasure house to identify all the things that he's collected. But that's not the same with these gifts. They're valuable, but the value is to be shared through others, and it grows when we share through others. So just as the Lord has equipped you with spiritual gifts, He's also preparing you in very gifted ways to go into the workplace. So you are uniquely created, you are uniquely gifted, and you are uniquely prepared for certain roles within your professional life. And so there's lots of gifts but what in the world might they look like? Because when people go to, let's just say, did any of you go to Meet the Firms last fall or this spring? Yeah. So when you go to like a Meet the Firms area and you're standing there and you want to know like, well, what are my gifts? Like, here's my experience and here's my resume, but like, how do I really make myself stand out? How can I let them know that I'm the person that they need for their role? And the real question becomes, how well do you know yourself? And so this is an opportunity for you to get to know yourself more. Be a little more introspective. Learn a little bit more about who you are, how you're gifted, what does your profile look like, and how does that fit in with different roles within organizations? So you can kind of come to look at your resume as something like this. And it is here and it contributes to your personal success, but there's some interesting factors. The square is what can you do, or what you can do, what you know, and what you've done, and who you are. Now, when you think about all four of those comprised of this is how you're going to present yourself to someone, a potential employer, someone that you're networking with, whether it's to build that relationship, whether it's specifically because you're interviewing for a job, there's something you have to keep in mind. All of these things, what you can do, what you know, and what you've done, are all about your performance. Anyone in this room could have the same performance. You could all have learned the same things, taken the same classes, had the same job, earned the same skills. You could actually have a resume that was entirely a duplicate of someone else's in this room. What makes you different in that regard is who you are, your preferences. So no matter what experience we've had, what classes we've taken, what knowledge we've gained, that can all be the same, what is going to make it different when you do it is who you are. And it's going to make a difference of not only of how well you do it, but how much you enjoy doing it. Have any of you ever been in a position that you wish you weren't in? Yeah. So it wasn't a good fit. We're going to talk about fit later. And so this who you are, your preferences, do you think it comes from nature or nurture? How many of you think nature? How many of you think nurture? How many of you have no idea? Yeah, those are my guys. So it's both, okay? So statistically, about 60% of it comes from nature, which leaves about how much for nurture? Great business students. So when you're looking at all of this about who you are, what is it like, how are you still going to stand out among a sea of people? Well, there have been lots of personality inventories created for people to learn about themselves. And if you happen to like one of these or have done one of these or administer these, I'm just showing you my preferences. So one that is not my preference is, are you a lion, a beaver, an otter, or a dog? Right? So it tells you, it's descriptive, but when you go into a job interview and someone asks you, tell me about yourself, which animal are you going to choose? Explain that one in a job interview. Do you see what I'm saying? Okay, tell me all about yourself. Well, I'm an otter. Okay, what do you think they're going to think? So let's not contextualize ourselves necessarily in a professional environment by an animal. What else do we have opportunities to do? A sanguine, a choleric, phlegmatic, and melancholy. Have any of you heard of these? Okay. I don't want to know which ones you are, but how many people want to be phlegmatic? It sounds like a nasty word, right? No one wants to be sounding like phlegm. If you told someone in the marketplace you were melancholy or phlegmatic or choleric, what's the likelihood that they'll immediately know what you mean? Do you even know how to describe it, if that's your type? So you have to be able to contextualize these things for the workplace. They're nice, they're fun, they're great to do, and we can have a lot of fun and we can learn a lot about ourselves with them. But we need to keep moving on until we are more well-versed and able to discuss them from a professional standpoint so we can specifically tell people how we can bring value to their organization. There's also the Myers-Briggs, and they have all of the different letters, EISNTF-JP, and you can be one of those letters, two of those letters, four of those letters. And there are many people who utilize the MBTI, the Myers-Briggs inventory, to assess personality and kind of identify how they'll use in the workplace. And it's a good, solid test. I'm not crazy about it because I don't immediately remember what everybody's 4 initials automatically stands for. So when I hear those words, I'm a this letter, and a this letter, I may or may not remember all of the qualities that are associated with those letters. Does that make, are you following me? Okay. So it's not a bad test. But for me, as somebody who interviews and hires and works with people all of the time, that's not something that I even really keep in the back of my head, although I know that it's useful and I know our career services utilizes that. And if you haven't had one, I would encourage you to go check it out. They've also gone and put these with animals to help you kind of combine one of the first ones we saw and your letters. So in case you can't remember your letters, you might remember what animal you are. But then we cycle back through this same process, right, of identifying, well, what are you? I mean, I'm not sure how many people want to be a rhino. A lot of people might want to be an owl because they're wise, or a lion because you're strong, but I don't know about being an orangutan either. So, you know, those are the things that come along with identifying ways that you can utilize to professionally communicate the value that you're going to bring to that organization. So I believe one of the ones that you've used here on campus is called StrengthsFinder. Is that right? Did you guys all take that? Do you know what yours are? You know what they mean? I heard yes and no. All right, so the ones that you've had that you can actually utilize, those have some very good descriptions. They're easy to translate when you're discussing business issues. I memorize mine by using a SIM card. Mine are strategic, intellection, input, individualization, and maximizer. Okay, so I can specifically work into a sentence or a story, an illustration, about how those apply to me. So I think those are very good, and you guys should utilize those, especially since you've already had them and taken them, and to put them into the context when you're interviewing. Look at the job description and identify what is it looking for that I bring to the table. Are you following me? So if they're looking for somebody who's highly detail oriented, if they're looking for somebody who's XYZ, so let's just say on one of mine, for input and individualization and maximization, I like to think way not outside the box. I like to think off the planet. In the test that we're going to talk about, that's one of my highest scoring things. So I really like to think about things that don't yet exist. I like to think about how things that exist in different realms can actually cross and come together and be better or morph it into something unique. And so I can take those and relay that to someone when I'm interviewing for a job or describing why they might want to bring me into their firm to do some consulting. Another model is called the 5-factor model. So the 5-factor model has been around for a number of years. Scientifically, it's a stronger test and a more well-balanced test than the MBTI. So from a scientific perspective, the 5-factor model, is its generic form, is actually more scientifically correct and accurate at producing information about who you are, your profile, your personality, than the MBTI. And it looks at things like how open are you to experience? What's your level of emotional stability? Your level of extroversion? How dependable are you? How agreeable are you? And it looks at those things, and it specifically is able to differentiate. So with the Myers-Briggs, you might be one thing or another. With the 5-factor model, you score out in a continuum. So you're not one or the other, you can score in the middle. So I'll give you an example you'll see in a little bit. On the Myers-Briggs, you score either as an extrovert or an introvert, and you're one or the other. Okay, well, there's actually a whole category of people that aren't either one of those. They're called ambiverts, and that doesn't even exist within the MBTI. So ambiverts are people who have some degrees of being extroverted, but they also have some introverted qualities, because the whole terminology for extroversion is not about whether you do or don't like people. It's about how much extrasensory stimulation you can handle at one time. So it might be that yours is you can handle one particular type, but not another. You can handle people, but then you need some downtime. Or you might be all the way off on the scale and you just love people all the time and that's where you get your energy. So the MBTI does either or. The 5-factor model is on a continuum and people can score within the boundaries of not being either one, but a blend of them because they choose usually how to react based on what the circumstances are. So for instance, some people who are an extrovert all the time, like I said, they're good to go with people all the time. They enjoy it. That's where they get their energy. The introverts don't. I'm right in the middle. I'm an ambivert. I am straight down, almost right 50 on a scale of 1 to 100 because I really enjoy people and I enjoy being around them. But there are a couple of things that for me are too much when it gets too much. So when I go to work, when Southern has a booth at General Conference and we're talking to hundreds of people in a very short amount of time, I am so thankful that our shifts are only 2 to 3 hours long. Because then I've talked to so many people, I'm ready to not talk to anyone for a while. And I'll just go walk around, I'll look at the booths, or I'll go outside, or I can go back to the hotel and chill until it's time for my next shift. Some people don't need to take that break at all. They would be happy they're talking to thousands of people all day. So there's not one that's right and there's not one that's wrong. They're just different. So the 5-factor model allows you to differentiate in that way. Now there's an organization that's based out of North Carolina. It's called the Center for Applied Cognitive Studies. And they specifically took a 5-factor model of personality test and they contextualize it for the workplace. They used all language that's consistent within workplace vocabulary, and it is specifically targeted toward organizations and individuals within a professional setting. So the Center for Applied Cognitive Studies, and they named this form of the 5-factor model. There's been several, but this specific one is called the Workplace Big 5. And the 4.0 is their most recent version of it, and he teaches, this is a husband and wife team. He has his PhD and teaches at the UNC, and she has her MBA, and she helps develop these instruments and does the research on these tests and trains the consultants and things like that. And so what the Workplace Big 5 assessment does is it's personality. It was created in 2001. It's the most valid. Like I said, statistically, 5-factor models have more validity statistically than the MBTI. You did it in, how many of you did the short form assessment in business communication with Professor Starr? Okay, so most of you know this. For those of you that don't, there's 5 primary traits and 23 secondary traits. On the short form, you identify with your 5 primary traits. It doesn't go into the full 23 sub-traits like it does on the full-blown online version. The online version is 107 questions, but it actually only takes 10 to 15 minutes. The average is 11 minutes for people to answer that many questions because it's just answer it just based on your gut. All right, so it's very quick. And it can be utilized for competency developments, selecting talent, doing succession planning, helping people grow in their leadership, doing one-on-one coaching. It can be used for team building and 360, performance analysis and things like that. It's actually quite helpful. And I have had really good response from using it when I do some consulting for organizations on team development and follow-up professional development for their leaders and 360 uses. So, in case you didn't catch it before, it's NEOAC, it's need for stability, extroversion, originality, accommodation, and consolidation. So these are specifically how the Workplace Big 5 presents its form of the 5 factors. Need for stability, extroversion, originality, accommodation, and consolidation. And this is an easy chart to see what are some of the sub-traits. Well, on the need for stability, it includes things, it factors in things like what degree do you worry? Do you worry a lot? Do you worry a little? What intensity of reactions do you have to things? How do you interpret things? Is it optimistically or pessimistically or sometimes neutral? What's your rebound time? So if things don't go the way that you hope they went, or you're disappointed in something, or someone has broken your trust, how long does it take you to be able to re-enter that relationship and in that work relationship in a way that's still productive and engaged when that has happened and you need time to rebound. On extroversion, your warmth, you don't need to know these. I'm just sharing them with you. Your warmth, social ability, activity mode. Do you prefer to have a sedentary job? Do you like to be up and moving around and doing things? Are you prone to taking charge all the time, like you have to? You need to be in control? You don't ever want to take charge, or it's kind of somewhere in the middle. You don't have to, but if you're needed, you'll step up and take the role. How much do you trust others, and how well do you demonstrate tact in your communication and in your interaction with others? The originality focuses on imagination, complexity, change, and scope. So creative thinking, how complex are you at your thinking and ability to analyze complex situations and scenarios, or even create them? How much do you like that? Do you gravitate toward it or not? How adept are you at change? Do you enjoy change? Do you fear and dread change, avoid it at all costs? Or again, are you somewhere in the middle? And what's your scope? Do you prefer to see things at the 20,000 foot level and leave all the details to someone else? Or you prefer to see all of the details and think everyone else has their head in the clouds? And it is really hot in here. I'm not sure why, but apologize for that. Accommodation, others' needs, agreement, humility, and reserve. Are you more concerned about you and what you need? Are you more concerned about the needs of others? Which way do you gravitate? Agreement. Is agreement something you seek? Are you a harmony? Do you try to find harmony? Are you the peacemaker in the family or in the office place? Humility. Humility is not about like the form of humility Jesus had. So when I went up to do training 2 or 3 years ago, I had struggled with this because I immediately thought, well, who are we to gauge, someone's humility? But it wasn't about their humility or pride. It was about whether that person needed affirmation or recognition of what they had done. So for someone on high humility, they don't necessarily need or want public acknowledgement for something that they've done. For someone who's really low on humility, they more likely are going to need that type of affirmation, sometimes public affirmation, that they did a good job, won the award, whatever else it might be. So it goes all the way down to this level. And then on consolidation, it's about your perfectionism. How perfect do things have to be? Your organization, do you stay organized? Are you on top of things? Your drive, how much energy are you initiating to put forth toward the goals that you set for yourself and you want to accomplish? So are you trying to move forward and you're making that effort and it's important to you, or you don't really have a lot of drive and initiative? How able are you to concentrate in difficult situations? So if you were sitting in a room and people were coming and going all of the time, how well are you able to concentrate on what is needed for you to do versus being distracted and watching everyone or talking to everyone goes by? So it looks at all of these different factors and even methodicalness. So somebody who scores really high in methodicalness, they're going to have a goal, and then they're going to create a plan, and then they're going to create a plan to work that plan so that plan can be worked 3 times over to meet their goal. So they have this, they're very regimented, they set micro goals, macro goals, and they work to achieve their goals, and they work incessantly until it's done. So they're very driven, very methodical about how they do things. This form of 5-factor model has been seen as a best practice in many companies that you might be aware of, like Pfizer, in educational institutions, Wake Forest, Pepperdine, UNC, George Mason, Bank of America, Aetna Insurance, Allstate Insurance, in various military forces, in retail, in various utilities around the company. So it's very well known, and it's utilized by these people who see it as a best practice, not only for hiring talent, because right now you may have heard there's a war on talent, so to speak. All of the organizations, even though there's a relatively high unemployment rate, people are still looking for talent. They are still fighting over the best talent that's out there. And so companies want to be very sure that they're investing their dollars in recruiting that talent and building their talent pipeline so that they have a pool of talent to bring into their organization, to promote within their organization, to keep their company strong and viable. So when you're looking at the five-factor model, the Big Five profile continuum, you'll see down here there's some designations. So the score starts here at a 0 and goes up to 100. Now, here in an academic setting, a 0 is an F and 100 is an A. But that's not the same concept for this. This is strictly a continuum. It's descriptive. It is not saying one is bad and one is good. Neither is either one. It's just what it is. It's descriptive by nature. About 7% of the population will fall here between 0 and 35, 24% of the population between 35 and 45, 38% of the population between these scores of 45 and 55, again 24 between 55 and 65, and another 7% between 65 and 100. The 7% on either one are considered extremes. Okay, so any scores below 35 or above 65 are considered some extreme scores. So, need for stability. I don't know if any of you still have, how many of you kept your forms that you did in Professor Starr class and have looked at your sheets? Did it make a difference on how you looked at things about yourself? Can you give me an example of that?
Well, it's just kind of odd to like I knew I was, focused and concentrated and all of that. And then when I took the test, obviously that was my highest.
Okay.
Yes, definitely, I knew that, but just to see it was
Yeah.
really.
It changes things, doesn't it? So how could so she was just saying that she scored really high on consolidation, which is being organized, methodical, doing it right, getting it done on time. How would she position that well in a job interview?
Task-oriented.
Task-oriented, what else? Goal-oriented. She's always going to meet a deadline, right? She's probably going to be early on meeting the deadline. She might even set an early deadline for herself just before the actual deadline. So she knows that she's got kind of a cushion there just in case something happens. So you can utilize the things that you found on that form, your assessment results, and you can read what job description you're applying for, and you can specifically tailor things about yourself to match what they're looking for. So you can use what they're looking for to tell them why you're the perfect one. Are you following me on that sequence of thought? Okay. So just to quickly cover some of these, need for stability, the degree to which you respond to stress. There are two different things on the ends that anchor the ends. One is resilient. So you tend to handle workplace stress fairly calm and steady, often stress-free, not many things get to you. You're able to stay detached emotionally and reactionally and move straight into problem-solving mode. That's great. Some people on the negative side may think that you don't react enough and maybe you don't care. So there's pros and cons to both anchor sides. On the responsive, they're somewhere in the middle, and reactive, they tend to be very concerned, they're on alert, they're responding quickly. Sometimes they experience more stress than someone else. They may be highly reactive, but that reactivity may or may not show to anyone else. So you might have experienced a time when you were very upset at someone or something, but you didn't let it show. So that might be happening for people who are highly reactive. It doesn't always show up that they're reactive in a bad way, as in acting out or angry outburst, but they could be having that reaction even if it doesn't show. Under stress, they might be perceived as anxious, tense, angry, discouraged, or worried, and they may need to recover, take a break, a timeout before they go back into their task. For the need stability, as you saw on the other slide, the subtraits are worry, intensity, interpretation, and rebound time. On extroversion, the degree to which you tolerate sensory stimulation. Introvert, prefer working alone, typically serious, quiet, private, who you may prefer writing versus talking. You enjoy handling assignments on an individual basis rather than a team basis. None of those things are bad. The interpretation by others on the far end of the scale, however, might be that they appear to be a loner, or that they don't want to work with anyone else. So typically, people at either end of the scale might misinterpret the behaviors or actions of someone else at the far end of the scale, just because it's so opposite of themselves. On the extrovert, we've already talked a lot about, you prefer being around a lot of other people, talkative, enthusiastic, sociable, warm, trusting, fun-loving. You may become the formal or informal leader in a work environment. You're comfortable with just about any degree of sensory stimulation. Some people on the far end of the scale might think, that person kind of talks a lot. And it's not that necessarily you talk a lot, but maybe you talk more than they do. And so it's interpreted in that sense. Again, its subtraits are warmth, social ability, activity mode, your degree of whether you want to take charge or not, your trust of others, and your level of tact that you display. On originality, down here on these tend to be the preservers and the explorers. They have a lot of expert knowledge, low scores in originality. They tend to be very down to earth. They're practical, tactical, and efficient. They are all right with lots of repetition on the job in forms of task. Some people might think that they don't think broadly enough. On the far end of the scale, the explorer has lots of interest. They like cutting edge technology. They always want to do the next thing. They might self-describe as a strategic thinker, creative, imaginative. They like to just kind of think out there and see what's possible and what comes down to be. However, these people might think they're being a little bit impractical. Because in fact, some people, no offense to all of the Apple geeks in here, but the people there used to be cartoons out there about the Apple person who the brand new phone came out, but the next week one came out and it was 1/100th of a centimeter thinner. And so they had to go get that next one because it was just a little bit thinner than the first one was. And so there became all of these, the people who want to do that consistently, from the people at this end of the scale, they're viewed as perhaps not necessarily making the wisest judgments. They're just wanting the next thing. These people are going to be more grounded. They're going to analyze, is it a need? Why is it needed? And then they're usually more likely to be able to adapt to those kind of things. Again, this involves imagination, complexity, your amenability to change, and your scope of whether you like to see things from a 20,000-foot level or whether you prefer to be down in the details. Accommodation, the degree to which you defer to others. On a challenger, they are always going to express themselves. They're always going to have an opinion. They're not just going to hear something and walk away. They're typically going to have their say. A lot of times, they might think that they're being, quote unquote, the devil's advocate, which is not always a good thing. They may just keep going, keep going, keep going. On the other end, the adapter, those people may not say what really needs to be said. They're going to be more adaptable to the situation. They're a little less able and willing to speak their opinion. They want to be seen as helpful and a non-obstinate person, so they defer very often. And sometimes their position can be swayed one way or another by people on the low end of the scale that are pushing, pushing, pushing. And so you really need to be somewhere, hopefully in the middle, able to balance the challenger aspects of yourself and the adaptability aspects of yourself. These people need to work to perhaps temper their voice a little bit, and the other ones need to learn to have voice a little bit more. And so both of them are good and needed in certain situations, and yet none at the extremes all the time are best. And accommodation is, again, referring to other people's needs, your likelihood of wanting to and seeking to be in agreement and harmony with others, what degree of acknowledgement or recognition do you need or not need, and your amount of reserve. And then the last one of the 5-factor model is consolidation, the degree to which you work toward goals. So flexible people on the low end of the scale here, they are very relaxed about goals. They may or may not have a plan to reach their goals. They can multitask on lots of different things, may or may not actually complete any of them, might be a procrastinator. On the focus side, they work toward goals in a very consistent and diligent manner. Their mind works like a serial processor and work to get things done. They consolidate their time to pursue all of their goals. So they're very goal-focused, might be perceived as being a workaholic, might be perceived as being overbearing or compulsive when it comes to how they handle things that might interrupt their pursuit of those goals. And again, consolidation works with their levels of perfectionism, their level of organization, drive, concentration, and level of methodicalness. And so I've asked some students in the class who have actually been in Professor Starr class and have taken the Workplace Big Five to just kind of show you how, even though we're all business students, you can still be a little bit different than one another. And so I'm going to ask them to come down here in the front. So, ladies and gentlemen, you're going to have your scores, and to where Holly is, that end of the room is the 0 end of the score. All the way over here on this side of the wall is the 100 end. And so as we call these out, I would like for you to find level. We'll just say like right here, this edge of the table is 50. All right? So as we go through these, they are actually going to go stand so you can actually visually see differences in some of your classmates here. And so the first one that we're going to go through is the end factor, the need for stability. So find your score. Remember, down here is 0, and over there is 100. You guys see a spread, right? All right. So is your score actually the same?
Yeah, 29.
Wow. Okay, so they're 29. What is that? What do you remember about being a 29? Anybody remember anything about the range?
Not easily affected by stress.
So they're highly resilient. Right, they're in the 7%, right? So in the 7%, they're highly resilient. They can handle just about anything you throw their way. They're pretty much unflappable. Even though you might hear them react, they're going to be resilient and be able to handle it. What might be the concern of someone who's at the far end of the scale in the other 7% that's reactive? They may not care, right? They may not understand. If they're not showing concern, maybe they aren't concerned. Does that make sense? Holly, what about you?
I'm 65.
65. So Holly is over here also on an edge, but she's not over into the 7%. And she is more on the reactive. She's going to be responsive. My guess is if Holly, I've worked with her now for 2 or 3 years, so I actually feel like I know her pretty well. And so for Holly, let's just say in a customer service setting, right? Looking at the guys on a customer service setting, if there was a problem, they would be like, oh, yeah, we'll get it fixed, no problem. The customer may or may not be wired the same way. Someone at the far end of the scale, the otherwise, is going to be highly concerned. Oh, we're so sorry, you have a problem. How can we help you? We're going to get this fixed. We want to make sure our company does its best to give the best service possible to our customers. So if you were looking for someone in customer service, or that's your role, you really want somebody who's more on the reactive side or in the middle than you would down here on this side. If you have someone working out at the nuclear facility, you might want someone down here, right? Who's a little more unflappable, more reactive. Does that make sense? Okay, so this is fun. All right, on your extroversion, find your extroversion scores. Any surprises here for anyone that knows them? Any surprises? Were you guys surprised about your scores at all? No? Let's see. You're right in the middle, right, Christina? Just about right on the 45. So she's right in the middle. 2 more introverts and 1 ambivert. Yeah, way to go. Ambiverts. And then we have 2 extroverts. Are you guys surprised by any of those? Nope. Okay. So let's go to the next one. Originality. Hi, Ben. All right, so if you're on the creative team, who are you going to look for? Ben. Right, if that's specifically what you're looking for. Now, that's an overall score, so we don't know what his subtrait scores were, but overall, he's higher on the originality scale. In fact, let's see, Ben, you've got a 56. So that's a great score. He's over the threshold for being in that top 24%, but he's not in the 7% who can't ever think rationally. So way to go. No, those people, no, it's very interesting. So I've been doing some research specifically in this in my doctoral program on 5-factor models because I'm thinking about doing something with that in my dissertation. And so some of the ones and the extreme ones have very interesting traits, and that just happened to be one of them I found, that like they're not able to actually think down at ground level. Not all of the 7% have equal problems, but that was just an interesting one. But Ben's not there, so no problem. Now, were you guys surprised at your scores? Yeah? Okay, so tell me about that.
Well, I mean, I feel like I'm a little bit original sometimes because I always wanted to be unique when I was little and
Yeah.
still do. And I mean, I play like a lot of music, and so that's
Yeah.
more geared over there. So it was a little bit confusing.
Okay. What about you?
Same, yeah. It's, I mean, most people that know me usually kind of look at me as the outside the box thinker, but
Okay. Well, it might be interesting. Again, so what you have, when you saw all of these sub-scores, the scores that they get there are not, their overall score is not an average of those scores. It's some very complicated formula. But to know more, because I've had a situation like that too when I didn't understand one of my scores, you have to dig a little deeper. And so in looking at just the 5 super traits, you can't always go as deep as you would want to go. So those two might want to say, you know what, I want to do someday the full-blown test so I can identify why my score is driven by this, because more than likely, one of the factors of originality that we talked about is what's bringing their score down to where they thought it was unusual. So you guys might actually have really high imagination scores. Maybe it's a low scope score or, you know, something like that. Okay, so let's continue on to accommodation.
you're just an extreme guy, Ben.
So, any surprises from you guys? Challenger adapter? Are you comfortable? Would you say that's accurate? Yes, no? Not so much? No? So, tell me what you think.
I mean, it depends on the situation. Like, I can be challenger too, and I
Okay.
have been, so I don't,
Know why overall it's showing up like that?
yeah.
Okay, that's okay. So that would be a good opportunity then to explore, so what is it that's driving, you know, my score to show up like that, especially given it's a low score. Okay, so last one, a consolidation, the degree to which you work towards goals. Wow, that's quite a grouping, right? So, interesting to note, there's no one over here in this 24 or 7%. Everyone is either balanced or highly focused. So, I would hire all you guys that are high C scores, let me tell you. So, they're highly focused. Any surprises about your scores? Do you mind telling me a little bit about your real high score?
Definitely, I am very focused. I put my mind to whatever I'm doing, and I like go wholeheartedly at whatever I do. So it's kind of, I don't know. It was not a surprise at all. I was like, I knew this already.
Okay. What about you, Catherine?
Kind of the same. I get on a project and I cannot put it down till it's done.
Okay. Greg, what about you? You comfortable with your score? Surprised by your score?
Well, I think that's about right. I mean,
Okay.
I got like smack dab 45, so I'm like
Yeah.
right there, but
Yep.
balanced and flexible. So I think
Yep.
that's
It's a
pretty
good way to be. Anybody else surprised? Okay with your score? Good with it? Okay, let's give them a hand. Thank you guys so much. So visually, it makes a difference when you see a lineup. So for instance, when I'm out working with big groups, I have these big placards that I put up all around the space, and they range from 0 to 100, and they're at different intervals. And so it's very interesting because usually I've only had one one group that was highly clustered in most of their scores. Everyone else is usually pretty diverse. And so you can see some light bulbs going off like, oh, now I understand. Because a lot of times when we communicate with people and they're not built like us, their personality is not like ours, oftentimes there's room for misinterpreting communication when in reality there's no reason for it to be misinterpreted. It's just misunderstood because we're opposite of someone else, or we don't understand how someone with that profile communicates. And so it goes back to saying, okay, what can you do, what you know, what you've done, and who you are, and remembering that those are about performance, but the most unique thing that you can bring to your job is about who you are. And so who you are is strictly driven by DNA, your genes, right? 60% was genetic. This is cheesy, but you have to remember this. Can you change your behavior? You can change your behavior, right? If you're cognizant of something, you become aware of something that you need to change it, are you able to change it? Yes. And so sometimes when you have some of those scores that genetically predispose you to be one way, you might need to modify your behavior in the workplace setting to accomplish a goal or to be part of a team. So for instance, the extrovert might need to practice being quiet so the introvert actually has opportunity to speak. That's an example of behavior modification. For someone who is highly driven and has to do this thing on a task, and they probably want on a project, and they probably want everyone else to do it just like they do, that person probably needs to relax a little bit and let other people contribute in their own way. Versus a person over here who's way, way low on the C scale, and they're not picking up their slack on the team, they need to step it up a notch in their behavior, even though that's not their norm, so that the organization still benefits from their participation in that workplace community. So your DNA you can't change, those genes you cannot change, cheese factor, these genes you can change, right? So remember to change your behavior when necessary, all right? So you cannot change your genes, but you can change your behavior genes. So be sure and do that. Because organizations have a checklist and they're going, and when they're looking at talent, they're trying to identify the most important things to them and which of the people that, all of the people that are applying, which of those people have what I'm looking for. They're looking for a good fit. And there are more than two types of fits, but I'm going to share two with you now. One is organization person fit. And so basically you're looking for, does this person have alignment with our organizational values? Are their values, their interests, or their behavior, are they all consistent with who we are and our culture? So person, organization fit. So can you think of a company now that might not be in line with your values as a Christian? Budweiser. All right, so great example. Is that necessarily a company that you share values with? Most often not. So they might identify that, and you might want to say, that's not a company I want to go work for because they don't have values like I do. So for Stefan and others who think similarly, you can say, that organization is hiring, but I know I wouldn't fit within that culture because I don't share those values. What's a company you do identify with? Johnson & Johnson. Who else? It's an interesting example. Good example. What do you identify with?
I used to like their Christian values. They had some scandals recently, but I did like their Christian values, the way they treat their employees. I've done some research on their company.
Nice.
Their Christian values are strong.
So when you're looking at companies, make sure you go on their website. You do the research to find out what do they hold dear to them. What do they consider valuable? Because you want to be able to have that mutual sense of values and interests. Their values might be expressed very simplistically, just in a straight form. This particular company, respect, integrity, teamwork, sustainability, and service. Another company might be a little more graphic design with theirs, to try to visualize, it's about here, we're flourishing. We've got roots. These things are important to us, and this is what helps us grow and to flourish. So be sure as you're looking for organizations that you want to work for, identify what their values are. If you can't find them anywhere in their literature on their website, you should ask them so that you know ahead of time whether or not you have value alignment and value congruency and are going to be comfortable working in that environment or not. They want to know, are the people that they're interviewing, do they have the same mission? Do they want to help the organization be successful in its endeavors? Well, if you don't share values, you're probably not going to be interested in helping them accomplish their mission. But it's important for the company, and you probably have read this in some of your organizational behavior books and leadership books, but it's important to have all the right people on the organizational bus. So when you're looking at values and fit, organizations spend a lot of time looking at that, and you should too. Just like the motto of they're interviewing you and you should interview them, make sure you do that as well before the interview and after, because not only do you want to make sure you're on the right bus, the next part is making sure that you're in the right seat on the bus, and they do that through developing a profile for job fit. So a job fit is that you're the right person given your preferences, your skills, and your abilities specifically for the role that you're interviewing for and the role that they need to be filled. So two entities coming at it from two separate pieces, and they need to make sure that there's alignment there. Because if there's not alignment, the employee's going to be unhappy, the organization is going to be unhappy. So what might that look like? Well, it looks like that if they're going to measure, this is what they might do. Measure your thinking style to see if a person can do the job. They might measure your behavioral traits, i.e. your workplace big five, on how you're going to go about it. Your occupational interests, if you'll enjoy it. Another formula looks like this. A person has a job. The employer is looking for person job fit. Can they actually do the job? If there's a good fit, those people are going to be competent in that job. The person, what style do they bring to the table within this role? What does the role require? When there's a good fit, that employee is going to be highly engaged and highly productive. The person, their interest, if the job has a way in which to reinforce the person's interest, it's going to increase the employee satisfaction and increase their retention, which is always good for employers because high attrition rates are not good for organizations. So what might a bad situation look like? Well, employee B might not be a good fit for the job. So the behavior that employee who's not a good fit is going to demonstrate is they're not going to be productive. They won't be focused on their work. There'll be a bunch of negativity in their emotions and in their conversations. The outcome of that is that the value is lost for the organization because they're being paid to do their job, but they're not happy in their job, so they're not doing it or they're not doing it well at all. So the organization is losing value, and subsequently either the employee is going to leave because they're not happy or they're going to be asked to leave because the employer's not happy. So negative outcomes result when there's not a good person job fit. The fit is important because it drives employee or engagement. Engagement drives productivity, and productivity drives profitability. And all organizations want profitability. They're about getting results. What goes into results are, one, your preference, so knowing who you are and how you make a difference. It's going to drive your level of engagement. It's going to increase your level of engagement so that your investment in the company is going to be equal to or more than their investment in you, but in a healthy way. And your performance. So your preference drives your engagement, which drives your performance, which ultimately affects the organizational results. So when you are keeping this in mind about how you specifically as a person and who you are and your makeup can go and fit into a role when they're looking to hire, you want to be able to be so knowing yourself so well that you can clearly differentiate yourself from the rest of the crowd. They want to clearly be able to see that this person is the perfect candidate for us. There's a good values fit. They bring to the role what we need. We anticipate that this person is going to increase our organizational value, and we want to reinvest in them to grow them professionally and increase them in our talent pool. So remember that when you're going into these situations, the Lord has His hand on you. He will plant you someplace. Your first place may not be the best place, but it will be a place that He plants you, and He will enable you to grow there. But keep looking and being proactive for that good fit when you're looking for a role. I know a lot of you already have internships, but I just want to encourage you to, as you move forward in your professional career, how many of you are graduating in a few weeks? Yeah, several of you. So as you keep moving forward and getting more internships, just remember to Look for ways that you specifically and uniquely are aligned with the organizational values and with the role that they're looking to fit, and sell yourself in that way. Position yourself there in a way that you can grow with the Lord's blessing. Continue to keep learning about yourself. You know, half of knowing what you want is knowing what you don't want. And that list continues to develop your entire life. So keep learning about yourself. Remember that you have potential beyond what you think is even possible. And when you couple that potential with the Lord's plan, your candidacy, when employers are looking at you, will be so clear to them that you will stand out and you will be the model employee that you long to be and they long for you to be. And it will be a very healthy relationship and very blessed. Know that even if you haven't found a job, or haven't had an internship, or do, always know that the Lord has plans for you. Plans to prosper you, not to harm you. Plans to give you a hope and a future. And one of my favorite versions of this, an author wrote, he has dreams for you, big dreams. And so he does. He knew about you long before the foundation of the world, and he created you in a special and unique way. And I know that he will grow and bless that in a way so that you can be a witness for the kingdom and be a fabulous and professional in whatever role he chooses to use you in. Do you guys have any questions? That's it.